I think at this stage, what we're going to do is to open it up for a larger discussion. Maybe what might be nice is if we can spotlight all the facilitators of the breakout session, so we have them all seen, and then we take some questions from the group of facilitators as well as the rest of the participants. And I'll call upon people who've already chimed in with some questions. I think Anne Hartman had a couple of questions, one for the training group and one for the group on modeling accessibility. Anne, would you like to please pose your question or comment to the group? If she's here.
Hi, this was all really excellent summary. I'm sorry I couldn't actually join the breakout group. I was assigned to I think the training with David Mendez. So let's see, I guess that was my first comment. As a person who sees myself as always a go-between, I'm a biostatistician, but very applied. So I'm not a mathematical statistician. And I also have expertise in subject matter. I'm very quantitative, but again, application-wise. So in terms of training, well, one, I think you all probably said that you have to have an interdisciplinary team. You can hear me, right? Oh, yeah, okay. But I think I heard David Mendez mention that everybody should have really systems thinking expertise. I agree with the high level of that, but the reality of the detailed modeler or mathematician is probably, just a dream. What I see, because I'm always looking for compromises, is that I personally, over 10 years ago, was interested when our tobacco control research branch got interested in systems thinking. And we supported with, I think also OBSSR or whatever, some workshops at University of Michigan. And I found them really, really helpful. One, first, I think there was a broad, maybe it was 3 days or I'm not sure, and it was in person. But of course, now we could do things virtually to give the broad perspective of the types of models and then some applications. And they were different areas. They weren't just tobacco. And then drill down to another series of workshops or that were focused on tobacco. And I can't go and do a compartmentalization or agent-based model or even a social network, but I have that understanding of it. And of course, I'd have to brush up if I was really going to do it. And I'd have to work with, the modelers. But I don't know how much these teams really have the content or the bits and pieces, like the people who do the data surveillance or use Nielsen data or do the experimental marketplace. Those things, those people are important because of the nuances, right? Modelers can't possibly have all that detail, but the team. So I guess that I'm just saying the obvious, but that was my response to the fact that we all should be trained in systems thinking.
Can I respond to that quickly?
Sure.
No, I totally agree with you, but what I meant is that everybody should be training system thinking. in no system modeling. There's a difference between the two, right? System thinking is a framework that you can use
Right.
to conceptualize a problem and explain the problem to others and share ideas, right? So you think about you have a problem. Let's say how we are going to make prevalence drop, right? And then you think, well, there are individuals that what we need to do is make people quit more. That's increasing the cessation rate, and we need individuals to smoke less. That's the decreasing the initiation rate. So at least that you have some elements. These are very specific about tobacco, but at least that you can form elements in your head that go from A to B,
Oh.
right? That's it. And then I think you have that right now. You have what you need to in that regard. But we need more people, and probably all the scientists working in this area that can visualize and express ideas in this holistic manner, and so we can discuss what are the parts that are important or not in what you're trying to do. It's actually so we can think somewhat in a coherent way about the problem that we're trying to conceptualize. That's it. And then we don't. Not everybody will be a system modeler. That requires some training, and but the most important part, I think, is if you have good ideas, how to communicate it, how to formalize somehow, so you can transmit to others. It's being an architect of a building rather than an engineer, right? So we need engineers to support the pipes and understand the mathematics of the system that you are working on. But the beauty, the value comes from that conceptualization of the problem. That's the architecture of the problem. Okay.
Agreed,
Yeah.
100%. The framework.
Go ahead,
Maybe.
Rafael.
Yeah, so I wanted to, I 100% as well. I think one of the things that we realize is we need more modelers, and not just because we're modelers and we like people that do similar things like we do, but because we feel there's a big gap and a big need for people doing this kind of work beyond us and others. I think there's certainly a big opportunity, and I think encourage any young engineer, quantitative person, people in social sciences, whatever, to consider this as a potential career option, because there's really room and space. So I think that's a critical aspect. I think beyond that, there's also a need for more familiarity with modeling across the board, from those, let's say, if we think about tobacco control and regulation, those who do completely things that have nothing to do with the things that we do, to those who might be like you said, and like a bridge, right? Like you call yourself that you could be a potential bridge. And I think that familiarity and knowledge of modeling across the board and at different levels is certainly needed, because in the end, as we heard, industry and FDA need to consider the public health impact of regulations and other products, and they need to conduct analysis in that regard. And they cannot only be evaluated by modelers, they need to be evaluated by the community in general. So I think one thing that I guess agrees with what David is saying, but maybe just to add a little more, is that we felt that developing training and materials so that everyone who sells desiring tobacco control, regardless of their background, can get familiarity to understand and judge any, for instance, modeling analysis at different levels, right? But I think if I can think, it'd be great if I'm a tobacco control person and I see the Mendes or the Levy latest paper, and I can read and at least get a sense of the general aspects. And maybe I see another paper from a modeler that I'm not familiar, and I could quickly judge a little bit about the validity or the quality of that work, even if I'm not a modeler. So I think developing all that training and knowledge that can be then shared and I guess provided to those in the field, I think would be great. A big need.
Excellent. Thank you, Rafael, for that comment. Wholeheartedly agree. And I think we're trying to do some of that through our T-Course, at least getting started on this enterprise. A couple of hands being raised. I think Mike's iPhone, I assume that's Mike Cummings. Please go ahead.
Yeah, that's me on my iPhone. Anyway, this is very, very interesting. One of the things that just sort of popped into my head is why modeling isn't integrated into all the T-Core research projects that are ongoing, because there's modeling related to every aspect of science that's going on. I mean, you're pre-specifying, relationships among variables and then testing how closely those relationships hold up. The other area that I would comment on, which I think is a bigger problem than the scientific community, there's a real disconnect between what's going on with modeling and the effects on, how to rapidly reduce tobacco in the United States with the boots on the ground funding from CDC to state health departments and local coalitions. I mean, they have a very disconnected idea of how to achieve the goals that they are setting out to achieve, yet they're the ones that are doing it. So things like the National Tobacco Control meeting that comes up, I think is really sort of critical for some of the work that you guys are doing, getting that out to that group. A talk like Ken Warner gave at the beginning of this conference, just to educate people about what modeling is and why it's important, would be essential, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike, for that comment. Kara Kiesling, you have your hands up. Please chime in.
Yeah, so I think on the idea of making modeling more accessible, because of course, this would be really useful to states, regions, localities, but they may not have the resources to, have a full team who does this. So is there any way that this could be made more accessible to maybe communities that might be trying to do specific policies or modeling that could help them? Any thoughts on that and accessibility that way, not just for researchers, but community members?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That was briefly discussed. I think one thing that has definitely come out of the COVID-19 pandemic is broader public awareness of modeling and its relevance, and a whole slew of different visualization tools that are now available for people to kind of explore the effects of different, policy parameters, even if they don't understand it as parameters. What they're changing on the dashboard is a parameter. So I think that more work could be done in that arena. Within the at least within CISNet, one of the ideas behind developing a public website where model results are updated and where people can kind of specify the state that they're interested in getting results for, was also kind of informed by this desire to have modeling results be much more accessible to the general public. And I think the point you raised about communities or states or localities that are interested in tobacco policies. So I think there's definitely space for better tools that can help to facilitate that translation of models to the public. I think maybe one challenge is that it's not really part of standard practice to do that kind of work. And so some of our conversation was around like, how do we create incentives for researchers or academics to invest that kind of effort into doing that. So I don't think that's an answer to your question, but I think you raise an important point. So thank you.
And if I can quickly comment, just no, I like your power with the pandemic, Jamie, and I think we've seen at different local levels and state levels, maybe not at the locality level, but where there's been either modelers doing work for states here in Michigan. We had, I guess, modelers from the School of Public Health, Marisa Heisenberg, who's also a CAsToR member, and Andrew Brower, that were working directly with the states. And I think part of the reason why they were able to do this, and I think many states had their modelers at their state universities or in other places, is because infectious disease modeling is common enough that there is enough people out there to be able to do this local modeling, which was very important. And I think certainly in Michigan, it was helping drive decisions and very good decisions. So I think that's part of the need of trying to expand the expertise. I think local health departments need people with expertise to be able to understand modeling broadly, not only tobacco, but in general. Shameless self-promotion, we just launched a master's in computational epidemiology and systems modeling, trying to really capitalize on this awareness of what modeling does and the role that it can play in public health. So hopefully there will be graduates that will be now going into the workforce to have these more applied jobs that maybe then can facilitate that translation as well.
Yeah, if I may add to that, I think what's really important here, and we don't see enough of, and what CISNet really does a good job of, is documenting the models. You know, and I think it's not just a matter of saying, well, here's my equations, blah, 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 but explaining the models and the modeling. And I think that really needs to be more of a focus of modelers in general. And you know, part of that, you know, Mike mentioned, well, why don't T-Cores all do, all of them have their modeling? I mean, I think that really should be the aim. And the aim should be to try to somehow get the different T-Cores more involved with modeling. I mean, it's a way of speaking to each other. And that may be the most important aspect of modeling.
And I'm going to say, and again, I mean, we're biased, and of course, but we have some people who are tobacco control scientists and experts here. But I think some of the most successful grants I've been involved, it's been grants where it's either an epi or clinical trial study, where the last aim or a couple of aims are modeling, where it's directly connecting the data and the results that are being produced and at the same time the models are being developed and then they're put together. So I think this idea of bringing these collaborations more explicit could be quite helpful and powerful. And again, it'd be hard for everyone to have one of the Davids in their grants, right? So I think that's why we need more modelers and at different levels, so that yes, there's I guess enough for everyone to be able to capitalize on that.
Yeah. And let me follow up just a second what Rafael said. So we're talking about a lot of modelers and modeling, and that's important. That's a representation of an idea. You make a model, but do we have models, you know, everywhere? You know, every time you do a regression, it's a model. So the issue that we are dealing here is a specific type of a situation in what you call system modeling, and specifically there's a way to approach that. And the first thing you need to do is have this idea of system thinking learned that if we are dealing with this population health problem, we are going to be dealing with multiple aspects of the problem that interact in a certain way to produce an output. And either you recognize that and focus on a part and know, but I know what I left, or you try to tackle the whole thing. That's also important if you want to have a map, not a simulation model, but have a comprehensive thing, the idea. But that is what system thinking is beyond the ability to create multiple models, because we're scientists training disciplines, as Mike said, we are do modeling everywhere. So the translation of big thinking about multiple components that inform, that interact and form a system. That's the training that I think we need. I think is now required in to get an MPH in Master in Public Health. You have to go through accredited to courses or competencies that make you proficient on that. But anyone that is I think dealing with tobacco control or the tobacco problem, even though you are doing a specific job at getting data or getting parameters or whatever it is, the ability to have the big picture and say, I'm doing this and this is how it's going to fit on the, and this is why it's relevant, this is how it's going to fit in the big picture. Yeah, that's I think a fundamental aspect of the whole of the whole business of modeling in tobacco control, if you want.
Thank you, David, and others for your comments. We have a couple of hands raised and we're out of time. So how about we take one more question or comment, and from Doug Luke. If you are there, please unmute and ask your question.
Okay, sure. Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
This is really back to Jamie's point a little earlier, and the question around increasing engagement and transparency of models, especially with community partners. We have a long way to go here in terms of modeling, and it's mostly for cultural and disciplinary, historical issues. But in system science, there's an area, there's an approach called group model building, which has been developed by a number of people. Peter Hovman in particular is a friend of ours who used to be at WashU. And I think the group model building is tied pretty tightly with system dynamics models. So other kinds of modeling, agent-based modeling, econometric models, we haven't done as good a job. But if you want to look at some great examples of how you increase engagement with model development, look at this area called group model building. And then this, just very quickly, a second thing that Jamie mentioned was essentially disseminating results of these models. We've been working with developing tools like dashboards that are highly visual and interactive, and something, if other people are interested in, we're really excited about it. But this is another theme that came up earlier. I think we need to bring in implementation scientists. These teams are getting so big, we include everybody in them these days, but implementation science has a lot to teach us on how we get the knowledge that comes out of these highly formal methods into the community, into the hospitals, into the healthcare systems. And so that's another thing that I think we should consider.
Thank you very much. We'll have to look into group model building. I just did a quick Google search and it sounds fascinating.
And I don't do it myself, but I can connect it to people and some resources. So if anybody has questions, I can probably guide you.
I think the visualizations that you've that you've even shown to us in the symposium today. I think that can go a long way towards sort of attracting interest and while also simultaneously building comprehension around the model. So I think I think the visualization tools and the dashboards that you're developing are kind of a good step in that direction too. So I think those are all things that we can start to think about. What would a dashboard look like for tobacco simulation models that deal with more maybe like federal regulations or that are specific to the work that's coming out of the TCORs as well.